We are continuing the introduction of the Desert Fathers, translated by Helen Waddell. It is doubtful, however, if Palladius, who told that story, ever saw the point of it, for Palladius was a cheerful gossip, always ready to be impressed by the more obvious and picturesque activities of his elders, and in his first experience of the desert, summed the popular view in one compendious phrase. He had gone from the kind nursery of Alexandria to learn continence under Dorotheus of Thebes for 3 years, but could not stay the course. The life of his master, he confessed, seemed to him harsh, squalid, and exceeding dry. Himself, in his own phrase, a bishop of pots and pans, quick to detect a wine that had gone sour, and to drink a better, he became a faithful Boswell to the more austere saints, and a wholehearted admirer of virtues not his own, but the more sensitive and intelligent observers. Cassian, the anonymous author of the Historia Monachorum, the compilers of the Verba Seniorum, were less moved by the ascesis and more by the harder virtues, to which it led: magnanimity, humility, gentleness. The quintessence of the desert is in the exquisite story, frugal as the light of its own dawn, of how Macarius, returning at daybreak with his bundle of palm leaves, met the evil one, and the evil one fainted at him with his sickle. So the evil one's Russian? No. You know what I mean, because the sickle and the hammer on the flag. But could not reach him, and began to cry out on Macarius for the violence he did him. Well, the last book that you have shared on this channel was by a Catholic that was complaining about the USSR, so someone somewhere might have drawn this, merging the two themes, right? Yet, whatever thou dost, I do also, and more. Thou dost fast now and then, but by no food am I ever refreshed. Thou dost often keep vigil, but no slumber ever falls upon me. In one thing only dost thou overmaster me, and when the saint asked what that might be, in thy humility, and the saint fell on his knees, it may be to repel this last and subtlest temptation, and the devil vanished into the air. Yet the indictment of the life of the desert is not to be dismissed for a single flaw in the evidence, a misdirection of the jury. The root of the quarrel between the humanists and the desert is not the exact length to which the branding of the flesh may legitimately go. What ailed Rutilius and Gibbon and Lecky is the Roman civic conscience, and to the Roman civic conscience, the exiles in the desert are deserters from a sinking ship, fugitives from a rotting civilization, concerned only for their personal integrity. Augustine had the civic consciousness. The sack of Rome sent him to his book of reconstruction, a city that had foundations, whose builder and maker is God, but a city that could be built on the rubble of the empire, even as Blake would have built Jerusalem among the dark satanic mills. We are of God, the desert seemed to say, and the whole world lieth in wickedness. Well, it's usually best to stay amongst the world and spread a little good and truth here and there, right? One of the oldest brief summaries of the desert rule is the answer of an old man questioned as to what manner of man a monk should be, so far as in me is alone to the alone, Salus ad solum, except, said the abbot Alais, a man shall say in his heart, I alone and God are in the world, he shall not find peace. Now this, profoundly true of the first encounter of the soul and God, though not of the ultimate adoration that burns up all knowledge of a man's self, is a kind of treason to the Kiptas Dai, nor does it represent the whole of the desert teaching. Now, one of the spirituality is really a fragment of religion. And if, because in spirituality you can leave off the relationship to God or any of the spiritual beings and make it all about yourself, or you can leave off the relationship aspect to and regulations that involve the other creations, and it's just about your rituals and stuff to God or your deity or claim or whatever. With our neighbor, said Antony, and some people it's not even anything spiritual. It's, they feel like they feel good or something, and it's like, it's not always about ease and good feelings. But if you work on what you should be working on, if your economic work and all that other, all your other duties in life, you may find it easier to, feel good about yourself and feel good in general. With our neighbor St. Antony, Princess Solitaries is life and death, but it has enough truth in it to shadow forth the supreme temptation for the saint, the artist, and the lover, the temptation of the deep delight towards the secret solitude. Skipped a page, sorry. The narrow world that has room only for the saint and God, the artist and his subject, the lover and his beloved, who is so safe as we, where none can do treason to us except one of us two. Portus impassibilitatis mentionem in terra quietorum praeparer, the haven of invulnerable living, to build a house in the land of quiet men. Phrases such as these do but make articulate the sighing of the prisoners of a clattering world, the last delusion of the human heart, that solitude is peace, sentence after sentence from the desert. A trackless place of Antony's desire fall on the ear with a dangerous enchantment. The remoteness of death is in the lovely rhymes of the old hermit's questioning. Tell me, I pray thee, how fares the human race, if new roofs be risen in the ancient cities, whose empire is it that now sways the world. Arsenius came from Theodosius's court, and the guardianship of the young princes to Sceta, hungry for a quiet that could not be shaken even by the rustling of reeds or the voice of a bird. It is the same hunger that gives a sudden eloquence to a quiet aged monk, whom Cassian and his friend Germanus found sitting in a crowded monastery, a monk that had been a famous solitary in the desert. The young man asked him how it came that he had left the higher life for the lower, and the whole vanished sweetness of the life of quiet is in the old man's reply. He told them of the first days in the desert, when a few found their way there. The sparseness of those who at that time dwelt in the desert was gracious to us as a caress. It lavished liberty upon us in the far-flowing vastness of that solitude, but others came to know the sweetness of the quiet, which their coming destroyed. Quam gustata vastiori eremi libertate. No English word can give the poignancy of the Latin angustus. The vaster freedom of the desert was cabined, and the fire of divine contemplation grew cold. Sublimity was gone. Let him make up for it by obedience. So the old man came back from the desert, now a thoroughfare, to submit to the yoke of his abbot's will and the friction of living among men. The truth is that solitude is the creative condition of genius, religious or secular, and the ultimate sterilizing of it. No human soul can for long ignore the giant agony of the world and live except indeed the mollusk life, a barnacle upon eternity. No artist ever desired the soundless world more fervently than the younger Keats. It is as though he foresaw the baptism wherewith he was to be baptized, and shuddered from it. The hour haunted him. Do you not hear the sea? The black moods in which poetry, ambition, and love passed by him with averted face, when the creation of beauty seemed to him an impertinence in the face of anguish, and a poet's coronation an outrage in a world where women have cancers. These are barren for the craftsman, but the matrix of the supreme artist, the second version of Hyperion, is lamentable, but the sickness that ailed it was an immortal sickness which kills not. It works a constant change till it brought him to the moving waters at their priest-like task of pure ablution round earth's human shores, where every word is an abyss of human experience. Now, one of the things that we can look at here is the there's problems with the women. It's like, well, obviously if there's problems with the women, it's almost always the men have problems too, and why not help the women with their problems, per se, rather than, we gotta run away from them women. The desert itself came to realize that solitude is a thing to be earned, and the Venerable Bede's account of St. Cuthbert's departure from Lindisfarne is the consummation of its wisdom. To Cuthbert, the solitude of Farne Island, sieged on this side and on that by the deep and infinite sea, was the reward of a lifetime journeying and preaching among the border fells, and endurance of that community life, which can be, said the Buddha, like sword grass in one's hand. So in that same monastery he fulfilled many years, and at last, with the good will of his abbot and brethren to accompany him, he set out in deep delight toward that secret solitude for which he had so long desired and sought and striven. The coming and going of the active life had done its long work upon him, and he rejoiced that now he had earned his right to climb to the quiet of meditation upon God. The abbot Longinus said to the abbot Lucius that he was minded to shut himself into his cell, and refuse the face of men, that he might perfect himself, unless thou first amend thy life, going to and fro amongst men. Said the abbot Lucius, thou shalt not avail to amend it, dwelling alone. If thou seest a young man ascending up to heaven by his own will, catch him by the foot and throw him down, for it is not expedient for him. That saying is ascribed vaguely to certain of the fathers, but it savors the ruggedness of Marcius, who could be gentler with a blinded hyena kitten than with his own kind. Yet, for two young men, his heart was soft enough. Rufinus told the story, and put style on it. The abbot Vindemius also told it, and was wise enough to give it word for word as he had heard it from the saint himself. It is worth the transcribing in full, for it is a summary of the desert initiation. The abbot Vindemius used to tell how Marcius told him this story, saying, once when I was living at Skita, there came down two youths, strangers. One of them was beginning to grow a beard, the other not yet. They came to me, asking, where is the cell of Abbot Marcius? And I said, what is your will with him? They made answer, we have heard of him, and are come to Skete to see him. I say to them, I am he. They asked my pardon, and said, here we would like to abide. But I, seeing them delicate and seemingly come of wealthy folk, said to them, ye cannot stay here. He that was the elder said, if we cannot stay here, we shall look for some other place. Then I said within my heart, why should I hurry them? And they be offended. The very hardship will make them flee of themselves. And I said to them, come, make yourselves a cell, if you can. And they said, only show us how, and we shall do it. So I gave them an axe and a basket of loaves and salt, and I showed them a hard rock and said, Quarry this, and bring yourselves logs from the marsh, and when ye have put on the roof, abide in the one place. But I was thinking that because of the hard toil they would flee. But they questioned me, saying, What shall we work on here? I say to them, Plaiting palm leaves and taking leaves from the palm trees in the marsh. I showed them the beginning of a plait, and how to join them together. And I said to them, Make baskets and give them to the sacristans at the church, and they will supply you with bread. After this I went away from them, but they patiently carried out everything I told them. And they did not come to me for 3 years, and I waited, debating in my heart, saying to myself, How think you they do, that they have never come to ask counsel of me about their thoughts? Some that are a great way off come to me, but these that are close to me come not, nor have they gone to any other, unless only to church, to receive in silence the host. So I prayed to God, fasting for a week, that he would show me how they did. And when the week was ended, I rose up and went to see them, how they lived. And when I knocked, they opened to me and greeted me in silence. And I prayed and sat down. The elder nodded to the younger to go out, and himself sat weaving a plate, speaking not at all. And towards the 9th hour he made a sign by knocking, and the younger came in and made a little stew of vegetables. And at the elder's nod he brought a table and set 3 fowls on it, and stood silent. But I said, Rise, let us eat. And we rose and ate. And he brought a little jar, and we drank. And when evening was come, they said to me, Dost thou go away? I answered, Nay, I shall sleep here. So they laid a mat for me in one place, and for themselves in another corner apart. And they took off their girdles and their aprons, and together laid themselves down on their mat to sleep before me. And when they had lain down, I prayed to God that he would show me the manner of their toil. And the roof of their cell was opened, and there shone a great light as of day, but they themselves saw it not. But when they thought that I was asleep, the elder touched the younger on the side. And they rose up and girdled themselves, and stood in silence, stretching out their hands to heaven. And I saw them, but they did not see me. And I saw evil spirits like flies coming about the younger brother, and some even coming to sit on his mouth, some on his eyes. And I saw an angel of God with a sword of fire, going like a rampart round about him, and fighting the demons from him. But they could not come near the elder. Towards morning they laid themselves down, and I made as though I were waking from sleep. And they did likewise, but the elder said to me this word only, Wilt thou that we sing the 12 psalms? I said, Yea. And the younger brother chanted 5 psalms, 6 verses at a time, and a Alleluia. And with every word there came from his mouth a torch of flame, and ascended to heaven. Now, if we fall into the King James Version issues, well, particularly the doctrinal ones, the hello is Lucifer, but it's a word for Venus, and, you know, looking towards and stuff like this. And wa is and or ad, and Yah is God. So make of that what you will. And like that, so is this 48 to 150? No, I mean 38 to 150. Which 12 psalms? And with every word that came from his mouth, a torch of flame, and ascended to heaven. In like fashion, when the elder opened his mouth to chant, as it were the smoke of fire rose from his mouth and reached up to heaven. And I said from my heart, the office as they did, going out, I said, Pray for me. And they in silence assured me. And I knew that the elder was made perfect, but that the enemy still besieged the younger. And after a few days the elder brother slept in peace, and on the 3rd day thereafter the younger. And when other of the fathers would come to see the abbot Macarius, he would take them in their cells, saying, Come, see the place of martyrdom of these lesser pilgrims. There is something of that story of the living voice. It, as though Vindemius himself had been so moved that he kept the very intonation, the gruffness, the quick chains of tense of the teller. But it is the rare word, martyrdom, that betrays the old man's humanity. For the ascetic and mystic, a swift translation to eternity and the passing of youth in the denial of youth must seem great gain. Yet Macarius, inured as he was to abnegation and silence, is shaken by them. They died young, and to the less disciplined reader, the vivo funere, the living burial of Rutilius's anger, comes unbidden to the mind. Rutilius and Dante meeting Brunetto Latini on the lip of hell. Sometimes we have in what people call the Old Testament the P or the F as being the lip. What chance or fate, as a prefix, like the on the edge or something like that, a prefix or suffix or in the middle, it can add that meaning. What chance or fate hath brought thee to this place? Ere thy last day, yonder above, I said, in the clear life, I lost myself in a valley before my years were full. Now that it should be so is perhaps the ultimate proof of the power of matter, the depth of the warfare between the spirit and the flesh. Why does there have to be a warfare between spirit and flesh? For the martyr's grave of these lesser pilgrims is not the only waste of youth and human experience, leaving aside the annihilation of an entire generation in 4 years, not yet a quarter of a century ago. How many have died or been maimed in a chemical and biological research? How many litter the track to the northern or southern pole? How many have been taken by Everest and his peers? How many dead and still to die in the conquest of the air are in that last exploration which gives us, this generation, its nearest approach to religious ecstasy, the annihilation of space in speed? Gauguin, like any desert fanatic, left his Paris-banking house and his comfortable wife and watched his small son starve and himself died in nakedness and ecstasy because he had discovered paint as the desert discovered God. Now, this time was seeing the emergence of, well, if you're really gung-ho about something, that's being fanatical. Now, that's not really the sense religiously, is it? It's that you mistake or treat or whatever the temple as it. That you treat the teacher as it. You're worshiping some book or some way shower or whatever, rather than following the teachings. Or you can be fanatical by claiming a path and not following the teachings. So there's, those ways. Anyways. Van Gogh went mad and struggling to paint light. They found a fragment of a letter in his pocket after he had shot himself. Well, my own work, I am risking my life for it, and my reason has half foundered in it. And that's all right. It is not that these are not grieved for, but they are not grudged. No generous spirit will shirk the arduous, provided it be unknown. A man must follow his star. We do not grudge it that these should have left wife and children and lands and reason for the flick of a needle on the speedometer, or a still life of a pair of old shoes. The only field of research in which a man may make no sacrifices under pain of being called a fanatic is God. Well, again, if you treat things as God that aren't God, and perhaps they have value in the spiritual life, but yeah. Yet it is legitimate to ask what harvest human thought has reaped from the desert fields. At first sight, it is meager enough, if one accepts the great names of those who came to school to the desert and returned from it to the more conventional life of mankind. Basil, Chrysostom, Athanasius, Jerome. Their contribution to the philosophy of religion is negligible. The richness of the records is in their kindness, their selfishness, their humbleness, but the records are of their ways with men. There is little or nothing of their ways with God. There's hardly a phrase in the vast bulk of the Vita Pacrum that has a tithe of Augustine's flaming power. the overmustering conviction of God that rests and shatters language in the letters of St. Paul. Well, they're better writers, but yet both these were men burdened with the world affairs, living passionate and turbulent lives. The chapter on contemplation in the Verba Signorum is the dullest and least rewarding. Following, as it does, page after page of Socratic wisdom and humanity, it comes as an anticlimax, a patchwork of minor prophecies, commonplace materializations of angelic and demonic powers. Augustine's single sentence, mens mea prevenit ad id quod est in ictu trepidantis aspectus. My mind reached that which is in the thrust of quivering glance, is worth a bale of it. In Cassian's collections, based on the long talks he had with the old men of the desert, sitting at their feet on a little stool of reeds, he has built up a lodge for the devout soul, line upon line, clay and bark and twig, patient and wise as a beaver, but there is little of the arduous fur. He has moments of rare and high eloquence, as on the ultimate reach of prayer, beyond sound of voice or movement of the tongue, or any uttered word, when the mind is narrowed by no human speech, but, all its senses gathered in one round, leaps like a fountain toward God, discovering in one brief particle of time such things as cannot easily be spoken, nor can the mind traverse again, when it comes back upon itself and again on the goal and consummation of prayer, when all love, all longing, all desire, all seeking, all thoughts of ours, all that we see, all that we say, all that we hope shall be God. But the bulk of the book is humane and gentle precept, a case book of spiritual direction, ironic and wise, as when he notes how a man who has despised wealth and pomp and great estate can be stirred to passion over a knife or a pen, and will so cling to a single codex that no man may so much as handle it, and how a devout soul, intent on the peace of contemplation, can break in wrath upon an interrupting brother. Benedict and Dominic alike came again and again to these quiet springs, and Thomas Aquinas would read a page or two of Cassian when speculative divinity became too subtle, and the fire of love grew cold. The truth is that to look for the secret of the desert in any form of words is to lose one's pains. They are seldom eloquent, but, like the brother whose sole possession was a single codex of the Gospels, and who sold it to feed the hungry, and when challenged said, I have but sold that word which ever said to me, sell that thou hast, and give to the poor. Their every gesture is pregnant. This same barren chapter on contemplation begins with a story that might warn the curious reader of what he will not find. A brother went to the cell of the abbot Arsenius, and looked through the window, and saw the old man as it were one flame, for he was a brother worthy to look upon such things. And after he had knocked, the old man came out, and saw the brother in amaze, and said to him, Hast thou been knocking long? Didst thou see aught? And he answered him, Nay. When he talked with him a while, and sent him away, again at one time Zachary went to his master Silvanus, and found him in a trance, his hands held up to heaven. And he closed the door and went away. He came back at the 6th hour, and again at the 9th, and still he had not moved. An hour later he came again, and knocked, and went in. The old man was lying still, and the young man said, What came on thee today, my father? And the old man said, I was not well, my son. Then the young man took him by the feet, and conjured him to tell him what he had seen. And the old man, forced to speak, replied, I was caught up into heaven, and saw the glory of God, and I stood there until but now. and now was sent away, the same Zachary on his own deathbed. I have never yet, said his abbot, come to the stature of his humility and his silence. Was asked by the abbot, Moses, what seest thou, my son? And he made answer, Naught better, father, than to hold one's peace. The fathers talked but little of the winging mysteries of divinity. A famous anchorite came to take counsel on high things with the abbot pastor, but the old man turned away his head, and the anchorite went away aggrieved. His disciple asked pastor why he had refused to talk with a man so great and of such reputation in his own country, and the old man said that if his visitor could speak of heavenly things, but that himself was of earth, if he had spoken to me of the passions of the soul, I could have answered him, but of the things of the spirit I'm ignorant. And the anchorite, hearing it, had heart searchings, and came back to the old man, and said, What shall I do, my father, for the passions of the soul have dominion over me? And they talked for a long while, and the anchorite said, Verily this is a love's road. A young man said to Cisois, I know this myself, that my mind is intent upon God. And the old man said to him, It is no great matter that thy mind should be with God, but if thou didst see thyself less than any of his creatures, that were something. Of the depth of their spiritual experience they had little to say, but their every action showed a standard of values that turns the world upside down. It was their humility, their gentleness, their heartbreaking curiosity that was the seal of their sanctity to their contemporaries, far beyond abstinence, our miracle, our sign. St. Anthony himself was once questioning the brethren on the meaning of some phrase in the Holy Writ, and each said what he could. But when it came to the Abbot Joseph, the old man answered that he did not know, and the Abbot Antony said, Verily the Abbot Joseph alone hath found the road, who saith that he doth not know. There is a great gulf between the stone-quarried wisdom of the desert and John Scotus Regena's vision of the light inaccessible, restoring and recalling the unity, ineffable, the seen and the unseen, the world of sense and the world of thought. But the fathers would have joined with him in his final prayers for the coming of the light, that shall bring to darkness the false light of the philosophers, and shall lighten the darkness of those that know. Yet one intellectual concept they did give to Europe